Hi everyone, and thanks for joining again. In this segment, I'll continue to walk you through how to evaluate your current fund development operation. As you know, one of the tasks in this step of the fund development planning process is to assess each fundraising channel separately. In the last segment, I showed you how to assess the direct mail and phone annual giving channels. In this segment, I'll show you how to assess the major giving channel. Major giving programs differ from annual giving programs because major gift fundraising requires a long-term approach, while annual gift fundraising is focused on short-term results. However, the two are not mutually exclusive. Actually, they're complementary, and each one should enhance the other. Annual giving programs should help identify major gift prospects. Once identified, major giving fundraisers will have the opportunity to build relationships with those prospects. Throughout that process, they should help prospects to understand the difference between annual giving and major giving. They should also educate prospects about the importance of the annual fund and encourage them to get in the habit of making annual gifts, while also working towards a major gift. There are three required parts to assessing major giving fundraising programs. The first part requires an assessment of how the major giving program fits into the overall fundraising operation. The second part requires an assessment of the needs and the potential of a major giving program at your nonprofit. The last part measures the effectiveness of the existing or future major giving program. So let's start with the first part. When building or reevaluating a major giving fundraising program, there are some questions that need to be answered about how the major gift program fits into the overall fund development operation. What are the criteria for a major gift? As I mentioned in my first video, every organization defines a major gift differently. There are a few questions that need to be answered as you develop the criteria for major gifts for your nonprofit. First, what is the amount that needs to be given in order to be considered a major gift? The amount should be aspirational, but also realistic. If the largest gift your organization has ever received is $2,000, then you shouldn't set the threshold for a major gift at $25,000. The rule of thumb is that a major gift will be at least 20 times the amount of an annual gift. As I showed you in the previous segment, the average gift to the annual fund for our fictitious nonprofit was just over $50. Therefore, a major gift for this organization should be at least $1,000 per year. What are the standards for cash versus commitments? First, let me explain the difference between the two terms. A cash gift would be considered one that is made in the current fiscal year. Cash doesn't actually mean the donor has to pay with cash. In fundraising, this just means that the organization actually receives the funds. It can be cash, checks, credit cards, stocks, it really doesn't matter. On the other hand, a commitment would be a multi-year pledge where the donor commits to giving the organization a specified amount of money in a specified amount of time. The goal of a major giving program is to provide stability to the organization for the near future, usually through consecutive giving, which is why major gifts are usually defined as commitments over a certain period of time. In the example of our fictitious nonprofit, a major gift would need to be at least $1,000 in each of 2 consecutive fiscal years, or at least a $2,000 commitment. So the next logical question would be, in how many years can commitments be paid? The industry standard for the maximum commitment time frame is 5 years. A lot can change in 5 years, and that's why organizations won't count commitments beyond that threshold. In order to decide what the minimum number of commitment years should be for a major gift, you need to look at the giving habits of your donors. As we saw from the snapshot analysis, our nonprofit has a problem with retaining donors from year to year. Therefore, it may be unrealistic to ask major gift donors to make 5-year commitments. It makes more sense to set the standard at 3 years. The last criteria has to do with how gifts are paid. Smaller nonprofits usually define major gifts based solely on the dollar amount of the gift or commitment, without requiring specific designations. As nonprofits mature, though, They usually put more emphasis on longer-term stability of specific programs. Therefore, major gifts may need to be endowed, or they may need to be restricted to a specific program. Otherwise, funds would just go towards the general operating expenses. Ultimately, it depends on the maturity of your organization and their needs. Some organizations will also count bequests as major gift commitments, even though they won't be paid until the donor is deceased. This is incorrect. Donors need to make a commitment to the nonprofit that they'll pay off their commitment within a certain time frame in order to be considered a major gift. Since nobody can predict when a donor will die, bequests just can't be considered major gift commitments. Then there's also a question of how matching gifts will count. Some companies match the contributions of their employees. So should the donor get credit for both gifts? What if the donor gives through a charitable trust or a foundation? Who gets the credit as a major gift donor? There's no right answer to these questions. They're just things that need to be considered as you go through this fund development planning process. That's why the next step is to work out all of these questions and to develop policies for major gift acceptance. Based on this analysis, we've determined that the example organization will define a major gift as a commitment to make gifts totaling at least $3,000 within 3 years of the date the commitment is made. Once you've defined the criteria for major gifts, it's time to determine the scope of the major gift prospect base within your solicitable prospect base. It wouldn't make sense to try to work with all of your prospects on major gifts, and that's why you need to identify specific major gift prospects. First, you should identify any donor who has given at or near the major gift threshold as a major gift donor prospect. Next, develop a procedure for utilizing wealth screening and rating information to identify potential major gift prospects. Lastly, obtain feedback from your staff, your volunteers, board of directors, and other stakeholders about any individuals that they think has both the capacity and inclination to give at or near the major gift level. Using the definition of major gift, let's set the parameters for the solicitable major giving prospect base for our example nonprofit. First, any donor who has given $2,500 or more within 4 consecutive years. Second, any donor who has given $900 or more in any year. Third, any prospect in the top 5% of wealth research. And lastly, any individual identified as a potential major gift prospect by internal or external stakeholders. For the purpose of our analysis, let's assume that there are 1,500 major giving prospects at our fictitious nonprofit. Now that we've assessed how the major giving program fits into the overall fund development operation, it's time to analyze the needs and the potential of the major giving program. First, you need to get a handle on your major giving prospect base. In the second video segment, I talked to you about analyzing your entire prospect base. Well, that's what you need to do, but with the specific solicitable major giving prospect base that you identified in the previous step. The more you know about the prospect base, the more successful you'll be. Very few organizations have enough resources to effectively cover all of their major gift prospects. Since major gifts are raised through personal solicitations, effective coverage means that major gift prospects are assigned to a specific staff member or sometimes a volunteer who's responsible for building and managing the relationship with the assigned prospect. In order to allocate scarce resources for the major giving program, it's necessary to prioritize prospects based on their capacity and likelihood of giving. Here are the factors to analyze and consider as you identify your priority major giving prospects. First, your highest capacity prospects should be assigned to a staff member or should be considered staffed. Highest capacity will be defined by your prospect base. The highest rated prospect should already be part of your major giving prospect base, so more in-depth research will be needed to identify the subgroup of prospects with the highest capacity. For example, through your research, you may uncover high-level executives working for a company that just went public. You would want to make sure that these prospects are assigned to a staff member right away, since they'll have a significant amount of appreciated stock that they could designate to your organization. Next, take a look at the past giving history of your major gift prospects. This is an indicator of charitable inclination. Those prospects have given the most money in their lifetimes, given the largest individual gifts, and given the most consecutive years should be assigned to a staff member. Lastly, do some digging and find out who your major giving prospect pool has engaged with your organization. Attending events, volunteering, visiting your website, etc. are all indicators of an interest and affinity for your organization. If you have enough staff members to cover this group, these are likely good prospects. For the purpose of this sample analysis, let's assume that there are 600 priority major giving prospects. Let's move forward and get a handle on major giving staffing. If you don't yet have a major giving program, then you won't have any staff, but your task is the same as if the organization had an existing major giving staff. You need to determine what the ideal number of frontline fundraisers would be for you to cover the subgroup of your top major giving prospects. Just to refresh your memory, you must let data drive your decisions. In other words, you can't just say that you need 3 major gift fundraisers because that's how you've always done it. I'll show you what I mean using the example nonprofit. We've already identified there are 1,500 major giving prospects and 600 priority prospects. Industry research tells us that there should be between 100 and 150 prospects in a major gift fundraiser portfolio, and we currently have 2 major giving fundraisers. Our interpretation is that we need between 4 and 6 major gift fundraisers to staff all priority major gift prospects. And from that, we know that we're lacking 2 to 4 major gift fundraisers. So the recommendations would be, the ideal major giving fundraising program will include 6 frontline fundraisers with 100 priority major gift prospects assigned to each of them. We need to hire 4 major giving fundraisers. The ideal major giving fundraising program will also require a director to manage the 6 frontline fundraisers, and we'll need to hire a director of major giving. So let's evaluate the major giving program staffing in the next step of our fund development planning process. After we get a handle on our staffing and prospect base, we need to build portfolios of assigned prospects for major gift fundraisers. Some organizations assign prospects based on their geographic region. For example, there would be a frontline fundraiser assigned to New York City, and all prospects residing or working in or near New York City would be assigned to that fundraiser. Nonprofits often prefer this method because it reduces travel expenses. I once worked for a university that had 6 major gift fundraisers flying to San Francisco from Albany, New York, which was extremely costly. They each had different prospects to see in California, but it would have been much cheaper to have one person go out there and see all of those prospects. That's why some other organizations assign prospects based on interests or affinities. The best example of this would be constituent-based fundraising in higher education institutions. Using UAlbany as an example, there's a major gift fundraiser who works exclusively with the Rockefeller College, and all major gift prospects who are alumni of the Rockefeller College are assigned to this fundraiser. This is beneficial because the fundraiser gets to know everything about the school so that he can more effectively raise funds for them. When building portfolios, it's important to keep them balanced. So what do I mean by balanced? Well, the fundraising cycle consists of 5 stages: identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. This can also be referred to as the major gift pipeline. I'll briefly explain what I mean. The first step is identification, and this is all about finding prospective donors for your organization. This can be done the old-fashioned way by going to Chamber of Commerce events with a fistful of business cards and handing them out. It can also be done through data mining. Most often, major giving prospects are identified through annual giving channels or special events. The nonprofit's board of directors or volunteers will often help identify major gift prospects as well. If a prospect is in the identification phase, it likely means that they are undergoing further research so that they can be added to the prospect database. The next step is qualification. As I keep saying, prospects need two things in order to turn into donors: the capacity to give and the inclination to give. The qualification step is needed to determine the capacity and inclination of prospects. This way, you can rule out prospects with no capacity and/or no inclination to give to your organization. Qualification can be achieved through in-depth research, surveys, and/or talking directly with prospects. If a prospect is in the qualification phase, it means that you're trying to figure out if they will become promising prospects or not. In major gifts, it can take up to 3 years to get someone from qualification to solicitation. The third step in the fundraising cycle is cultivation. The goal of this step is to build prospects' connection with your organization. Depending on the prospect, that may be achieved by simply educating them about your organization. For others, it may mean engaging them in volunteer activities. There are hundreds of ways to cultivate prospects. The most important part of this step is to make prospects see the value in your organization so you can move them towards solicitation. If a prospect is in the cultivation stage, it means that you've already identified them as qualified prospects who have at least some capacity and inclination to give a major gift to your organization. And now you're focusing on building their affinity to your nonprofit in preparation for the next stage. Some fundraisers make the mistake of dragging on the cultivation stage. Depending on the size of the gift that you're seeking, the cultivation stage should take no more than 2 years to get to the solicitation stage. The solicitation is the phase of the fundraising cycle where you actually ask for the gift. It's not just the part where you say the words. It's also the preparation leading up to the ask. You have to determine how much to ask for, the purpose of the gift you're asking for, and how to pitch it to the potential donor. It also involves the follow-up afterward and to have appropriate paperwork signed. If a prospect is in the solicitation stage, it means that you're planning to ask them for a major gift within the next 6 months. At that point, you should have a good idea of how much you'll ask for and the purpose of the gift. The last step in the fundraising cycle is stewardship. This is all about recognizing the donor for their gift in a way that's appropriate and meaningful to them. If donors don't feel good about their gift or appreciated by your organization, they won't give to you again. A donor goes into stewardship the moment they say yes to your ask. Stewardship is an ongoing process, but is also aimed towards resolicitation, which some consider to be a 6th stage in the fundraising cycle. The reason that I outline these stages during this section is because it's important to build portfolios that have a balance between prospects in these different stages. If a fundraiser only has prospects in the identification and solicitation stages, they won't be able to bring in revenue during the years in the middle. The appropriate mix for a portfolio will be wholly based on your organization. In most nonprofits with designated research staff, prospects in the identification phase won't be put into fundraisers' portfolios. Those fundraisers will then start with the qualification stage. However, I've worked with nonprofits where the fundraisers are responsible for the identification and research of their own prospects. So organizational structure plays a huge role in portfolio makeup. On your to-do list, make sure to ensure that your database has the capabilities to track prospect stages and major giving criteria, and also update the database with accurate stages for each major gift prospect. All of these factors are important to analyze so that you can make predictions and appropriate decisions about your major giving program. For example, if 50% of your major giving prospect base is in either the identification or qualification stage of the fundraising cycle, you can be sure that you won't see large gifts from half of your major giving prospect base for at least a year or 2. I've watched many executives hire major gift officers thinking that they would start raising large gifts right away. And the fact is, the fundraising cycle takes time, and when done correctly, it'll build long-term results and are well worth it. On the other hand, if 80% of your major giving prospects are in either the identification or qualification stage of the fundraising cycle, then maybe it just doesn't make sense to build out a major giving program at this time. You want to set yourself up for success, and sometimes that means making tough calls. Lastly, I want to cover the evaluation metrics for major giving programs. Unlike most other fundraising channels, the evaluation metrics for the overall major giving program are pretty much the same metrics used to evaluate individual major gift fundraiser performance. Total dollars raised is always going to be one of the top metrics for any fundraising program or professional. When it comes down to it, that's what fundraising is all about. So the bottom line really matters. This goal should be customized based on the current prospect pool and the portfolios of major gift fundraisers. For example, let's say that last year our nonprofit was raising money for a new building, and they were offering opportunities for donors to name the various rooms. For a lot of prospects, this was the motivation they needed to make a major gift. A lot more money came in than what was expected for that year. But now all of these donors in the major gift pipeline are now in the stewardship phase, and it'll likely be another 3 to 5 years before they consider giving again. This is why it's tough to measure the effectiveness of a major gift program and fundraisers simply based on dollars raised per year. Recognizing this issue, many nonprofits have shifted away from an annual dollar goal. Instead, they have 3 or 5 year goals, which is more accurately representing the major gift giving cycle. This can make it difficult for nonprofits to track their entire major gift pipeline, as well as the pipelines of each major gift fundraiser, and that's why organizations need to use additional evaluation metrics. First, nonprofits need to track how much fundraisers are asking their prospects for compared to the amount that prospects actually commit to. Second, nonprofits need to measure how prospects are moving through the major giving pipeline. They should measure how many new major giving prospects are identified, qualified, and disqualified to make sure they maintain a healthy major gift prospect base. They also need to measure how many prospects' stage movements are being made and the time frame it's taking fundraisers to move their major giving prospects towards solicitation. Next, nonprofits need to forecast their major giving fundraising results so they can adjust their strategies accordingly. This is measured using gift proposals. So when a fundraiser is planning to ask an assigned prospect for a gift, usually during the cultivation stage, they would enter a planned gift proposal into the fundraising database. This would include an estimated amount you'll ask for, the purpose of the gift, an estimated date that they'll make the ask, and the estimated likelihood that the prospect will say yes. As they get closer to the solicitation, they would revise the proposal to make sure it's as accurate as possible. This helps nonprofits to forecast revenue and track major giving progress. Lastly, some nonprofit organizations have moved to a different approach for measuring their major giving programs. This approach is based in fundraising research, which identifies certain factors or levers that have a direct impact on dollars raised. For example, research found that prospects who had more visits with frontline fundraisers were more likely to give. So many nonprofits started measuring the number of in-person meetings between prospects and fundraisers, or the number of major moves. A major move is something that moves the prospect toward the next stage in the fundraising cycle. For example, when I was working on soliciting prospects for scholarships, I would arrange meetings or phone calls between the prospect and the student scholarship recipient. This would be considered a major move. The important thing to do is to decide on the evaluation metrics ahead of time and to set custom goals that are ambitious yet attainable. Therefore, I recommend including major gift fundraisers, prospect managers, and researchers in any conversations about goal setting. Thank you for bearing with me through this segment. I know it's a little longer than you're used to, but there's a lot to learn about major giving, and I guarantee you it's worth learning. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about this segment. In the next segment, I'll cover the evaluation of planned giving channels. Thanks for tuning in.